This is NightlyHaven. I'm your host, Nikki, and if you love mysterious, strange, ancient, and sometimes downright weird stories, then you found your people. This is the channel where we explore the unexplained, the forgotten corners of history, and the mysteries that still keep researchers up at night. So if that sounds like your kind of rabbit hole, make sure to like, subscribe, and share the channel, and join our growing NightlyHaven community where curiosity is always welcome. Now tonight, we're traveling to one of the most mysterious places on Earth. There are ancient places in this world that feel different. Places where history doesn't just sit quietly like textbooks. Places where the ground itself seems to remember something. And then there's Stonehenge, a ring of massive stones standing silently in the English countryside. Older than the pyramids, older than many written civilizations. For over 4,000 years, these stones have watched empires rise and fall. They've seen Romans march across Britain, Vikings raid the coast, kings crown and kingdoms crumble. Yet through all of it, Stonehenge remained. But here's the real mystery. We still don't fully understand why it was built, how it was built, or what it was truly for. Tonight, we're diving deep into the facts, the legends, the strange theories, and the incredible engineering of one of the most mysterious structures ever created. Because Stonehenge may not just be a monument, it might be a message from the ancient world. And honestly, the message might be stranger than we think. Now, I have been obsessed with Stonehenge my entire life. Don't know why, I just always have. To understand Stonehenge, we need to go back, way back. Construction began around 3000 BC. That means the earliest versions of Stonehenge is older than the Great Pyramid of Giza, older than the legendary palace of King Solomon, older than most written languages in Europe. And yet, someone thousands of years ago decided to build something enormous. But Stonehenge wasn't built all at once. It was built in several phases over about 1,500 years. Talk about commitment. First came the earthwork, a huge circular ditch and a bank carved into the land. Inside the circle was 56 pits, now called the Aubrey Holes, named after the 17th century antiquarian John Aubrey, who first documented them. What those pits originally held is still debated. Some believe they once held wooden posts, which I believe. Others believe they may have held stones, which is also a possibility. But for one thing we know for certain, Stonehenge quickly became something far more complex. The most famous part of Stonehenge, of course, are the stones. And these are not small rocks. The massive outer stones, called the sarcens, weigh up to 25 tons each. That's roughly the weight of 3 African elephants. And they weren't just dropped randomly. They were shaped, carved, and carefully arranged into circles and horseshoe formations. Even more impressive, many of them connected using mortise and tenon joints, a woodworking technique, meaning the stones were literally fitted together like giant prehistoric furniture. But the biggest mystery may be the smaller stones. These are called blue stones. And they didn't come from nearby. They come from Presley Hills. That is nearly 150 miles away. Now pause and think about that. No trucks, no cranes, no metal tools. Just Neolithic people somehow transporting multi-ton rocks across the river, forest, and mountains. Now, researchers believe they used sledges, rollers, and possibly rafts along waterways. Still, even with modern equipment, moving those stones would be a major project. So the question becomes, why go through all the trouble? Why not use local stones? Unless the stones themselves mattered. Also, little known fact, the blue stones, if tapped upon, make musical sounds that can calm your brain waves. One of the strongest scientific explanations today is that Stonehenge functioned as an astronomical observatory. The entire structure is aligned with the summer solstice sunrise. On the longest day of the year, the sun rises directly over the heel stones, and its ray shines straight into the center of the monument. Thousands of people still gather there every year to witness it. Archaeologists believe this alignment was intentional, meaning Stonehenge could have been used to track the sun's, seasons, and agricultural cycles, a giant prehistoric calendar, which makes sense. For early farming societies, knowing when to plant crops or prepare for winter could mean the difference between survival and starvation. But some researchers think Stonehenge tracked more than just the sun. Some studies suggest it may also track lunar cycles, which means it could have been a complex astronomical instrument thousands of years ahead of its time. Not bad for people labeled primitive. Just saying. When most people think of Stonehenge, they imagine druids, white robes, sacred rituals, mystical ceremonies, and here's the surprising truth. The Druids likely did not build Stonehenge. Druids were part of the Celtic culture and appeared around 1500 years after Stonehenge was already standing. That means when Druids first arrived in Britain, Stonehenge was already ancient. However, that doesn't mean they ignored it. Ancient monuments often become sacred to later cultures, so it's entirely possible that Druids used Stonehenge for ceremonies. But the original builders? We still don't know who they were. No written record, no names, just stones. Of course, medieval legend had its own explanation. According to stories written by Geoffrey of Monmouth in the 1100s, Stonehenge was created by the wizard Merlin. Legends say the stones originally stood in Ireland. They were known as the Giant's Rig. Merlin magically transported them to England to build a memorial for fallen soldiers. Now, historically speaking, did Merlin teleport giant rocks across the sea? Probably not. But the story reveals something very interesting, and it's also cool. In the medieval times, people already thought Stonehenge was mysterious and ancient. So mysterious, they assumed magic must have been involved. And honestly, looking at those stones, you can almost see why. Recent archaeological discoveries have added another layer to the mystery. Stonehenge may have also been a massive burial site. Human cremation remains have been found within the monument, dating back to the earliest phases of construction. This suggests Stonehenge may have served as a sacred cemetery for elite individuals, a place where the dead were honored, or possibly where the living connected with ancestors. In ancient culture, death and astronomy were often linked. The stars represented the afterlife. The sun symbolized rebirth, meaning Stonehenge might not have been a calendar. It might have been a place where people believed earth and heaven intersected. One fascinating modern theory suggests Stonehenge may have been acoustic properties, which I mentioned earlier. When researchers recreated the stone circle using digital modeling, they discovered something surprising. The stone creates an echo chamber. Sound waves bounce between the stones in a way that amplifies certain frequencies, meaning music, chanting, or drums in the circle could have sounded otherworldly. Imagine standing inside the monument 1,000 years ago, fires burning, voices chanting, drums echoing through the stone, the sound swirling around you like it's alive. Suddenly, Stonehenge doesn't feel like just architecture. It feels like an experience. Alright, we can't talk about Stonehenge without mentioning the elephant in the room, or rather, the alien spaceship in the room. Some people believe Stonehenge was built with the help of extraterrestrials. Their argument usually goes like this. The engineering was too advanced, the stones are too heavy, the alignments are too precise. But here's the thing. Ancient humans were far more intelligent and capable than we often give them credit for. Archaeology has repeatedly shown that early civilizations had a remarkable engineering skills. So while aliens make for a fun theory, the evidence suggests something far more impressive: human ingenuity. Still, I wouldn't be shocked if ancient builders looked up at the stars while constructing it and thought the same thing we do. What else is out there? Stonehenge wasn't built alone. It sits aside a massive ceremonial landscape filled with ancient monuments. Nearby is Durrington Walls, a huge Neolithic settlement. Archaeologists believe many of the builders of Stonehenge may have lived here. There's also Woodhenge. Yes, that's its real name. Instead of stone, it was made from massive wooden posts arranged in a similar circular pattern. The area may have been the center of a vast ritual landscape, a place where people gathered for ceremonies, feasts, and seasonal celebrations. Think of it less like a lonely monument and more like an ancient spiritual capital. After centuries of research, excavations, and scientific analysis, Stonehenge still refuses to give up all its secrets. We know how old it is. We know how some of the stones were moved. We know it aligns with the sun, but the full picture? Still incomplete. Maybe it was a temple. Maybe it was a calendar, maybe a burial site, or maybe it was all of those things. A sacred place where ancient people tried to understand the universe. And honestly, standing there today watching the sun rise between those ancient stones, you could still feel that sense of wonder. The same wonder people must have felt 4,000 years ago. And maybe that's the real secret of Stonehenge. Not what it was built for, but the fact that 1,000 years later, we're still asking. Mysteries like Stonehenge remind us that history is far stranger than we often imagine. Because long before modern technology, before empires, before written history, human beings were already building monuments to the sky, trying to understand time, death, the stars, and their place in the universe. And maybe that's why Stonehenge still fascinates us today, because those ancient builders weren't that different from us. They looked up at the same sky, asked the same questions, and left behind a mystery carved in stone. Have a great day, guys. Bye.